Hello everyone, today you will hear an interesting story. It was a quiet evening. I had worked my shift and was finally able to rest in the comfort of my own home. My beloved wife Abigail, with whom we had been together for more than a decade, would be arriving soon. We always gathered over dinner to discuss our work days, gossip about acquaintances, and other world news. She worked as a teacher and it was exam season, so she sometimes had to stay late at work. I was a fireman, which was a tough job, and my wife was very supportive. And that's how she and I met, back when I had just started working, and we were sent on a call. When we arrived at the scene, we began to put out the raging flames that engulfed the apartment building. Climbing the fire escape to the third floor where there was a flashpoint, I heard a weak voice calling for help, despite warnings from a coworker that was dangerous to go inside now. I took my chances and rushed into the smoke-filled room, which was already being eaten by fire, and almost groped my way to the sound of the victim. I was young then, and perhaps my inner self wanted to cheer, but I soon found myself standing over the body under the beam and, gathering all my strength, pulled the wounded woman out, saving her from perdition. It was her, Abigail. When they helped us down, she looked at me so appreciatively that she seemed to have forgotten that her leg was broken. I visited her in the hospital for a long time before she recovered, then we started dating and soon we were married. It was the love of my life. We moved into my house, where we started our family. A couple of years ago, we had our first baby boy. We couldn't wait to have him. After her maternity leave, she went back to work, but lately I've noticed that Abigail has been coming in tired and somewhat agitated. What's wrong? I asked her worried, but she didn't answer anything specific, finding weightless reasons each time. One day we went for a walk in the park with my son. Abigail, when she was near him, looked very happy. I couldn't help but notice that her love for him overshadowed all her turmoil at work, which she said was the cause of her fatigue. We walked over to the ice cream stand, and I bought us each a portion. I watched her as she sweetly licked the cold sweet ball, and some of the melted ice cream was left in the corner of her mouth. I gently helped her wipe off the drip, and I remembered the first time we went to the park with her and ate ice cream just like that. We didn't get home too late, and my wife went to tuck in the toddler, who was tired from her walk in the fresh air, while I went to make her some tea. Abigail came back and sat down at the table. "Mix, I've been getting really tired lately. These students are wearing me out." She started a conversation. After I was transferred to high school, I've been wearing myself out. They're so defiant and disobedient. It's a nightmare. I hugged my wife and kissed her on the cheek. I wanted to comfort her. I recommended that she go to the doctor, maybe he will prescribe some kind of sedative, but she did not want to listen. She said there was nothing wrong with her mind, she was just tired. I decided to help her with the housework more, and when I managed to get home before her, I also did the cooking and sometimes took a vacuum cleaner. Yes, women's work was not always easy for me, and of course, I was tired too, but I wanted to make my wife feel better. All she had to do was to take the baby home from kindergarten. Sometimes, my mother would come over and help us with the household chores. One day Abigail came back not in the mood at all. When I asked her what had happened, she didn't say anything, just went quickly up to her room and locked herself in the bathroom. I knew something had happened, and it bothered me. I went up after her and tried to get in, but the door was locked from the inside. I knocked. "Abigail. Oh, sweetheart. What happened? Let's talk. Don't leave me alone." I heard something from behind the closed door. I listened and heard her turn on the faucet in the sink, so the running water would override the sound of her crying. But I heard it nonetheless. I made a few more attempts to talk to her, but to no avail. So I went back into the bedroom, hoping that soon she would calm down and come out. I was genuinely sorry that this was happening to her, and I didn't want to leave it at that. One day when I was off shift, I packed up and went to the school where she taught. What I saw in the halls, of course, gave me a mild shock. The kids had really become very spoiled. Their behavior even seemed unnecessarily wild to me. My generation was very different from the present one. I wanted to go to the principal's office, but on the way, I was almost knocked down by one of the students, who just shouted for me to watch where I was going and ran on, without even apologizing. Finally, I found the door with the sign, "Principal," and knocked. "Oh, come in." I heard a loud, disgruntled voice. I went in, closing the door behind me. "Hello there." I said hello. "I'm Mr. Shooter. Abigail Shooter. My wife works here. Idly press X out." He looked at me from under his forehead with a stern look. What I meant to say was that she's been feeling really bad lately. It seems to me that working with the high school classes is wearing her out a lot. Really, I haven't noticed any fatigue in her behavior. On the contrary, she was very active. Of course, I wasn't prepared to hear that answer, and now I was curious about the details. I'm sorry, maybe she just doesn't want to show it, but she comes home practically exhausted, and we have a baby at home as well. So what do you want? Do you want me to hire a babysitter? He sounded aggressive to me, but I didn't do anything to hurt him. Could you? I hesitated, wondering if I was doing the right thing now because I hadn't told my wife anything about my visit. Give her time off. After all, she's worked for you for so many years. You might as well go to meet her. The director threw a ballpoint pen on the table with which he was writing something in the magazine. Are you kidding me? Do we have exams coming up? Abigail's on the committee. She's preparing the class for the exam. What do you think you were gonna get here? Our conversation with him ended up going nowhere. The principal, already angry, became even more furious. I had no choice but to leave his office. I wandered down the corridor, hoping to find the classroom where Abigail taught. The bell rang loudly, and the students scattered from the hallway to their classrooms. Asking passing teachers where to find her, they pointed the way, and I went there. Through the window of the closed door, I saw my wife telling something by the blackboard. And yes, she really didn't look tired at all. She just seemed to have energy coming out of her. I couldn't understand such a sudden change in her demeanor. I peeked around a little more, trying not to disturb her, and decided to go home and talk it over with her. But Abigail came home in a bad mood. She came at me with questions about why I'd gone behind her back to visit her supervisor and demanded a vacation for her. I tried to explain to her that I was worried about her, but she wouldn't listen and kept blaming me for my actions. First, we need to be apart for a while. Suddenly to me she said, "What do you mean? How separately? But I'm worried about you. Like, just go away. I need time. And don't push me." I spent that night on the couch. The next day, on my lunch break, I found the number of a psychologist in the directory and called him. He explained that this happens in family life, most often from very busy schedules, work, and household chores. And before our relationship turned into a scandal, he recommended that we live separately for a while because often in such situations, it ends in divorce. Listening to his advice, I moved in with my mother for a while. I took my son with me too. Abigail didn't mind, promising to visit him more often. We both knew she needed her rest, and I tried to do whatever I could to make her feel better. It's been a couple of weeks since we separated. Abigail had been visiting her son less and less lately, but I tried not to pressure her. A little later I found out that the school exams were over, and I hoped that now I could try to repair a family relationship. I decided to visit my wife, stopping at the store on the way and buying the cake she loved so much. Soon I was pulling up in front of our house. Her excitement and a desire to see her were raging inside of me. I went to the door and was about to press the bell, but I decided to surprise her and quietly open the door with my key. What I saw stunned me. The house hadn't been cleaned. There was a mess everywhere and things were lying all over the place. I carefully entered the kitchen and there was already a pile of dirty dishes, and the garbage, which had not been taken out for a long time, was already beginning to give off an unpleasant smell. In the corner behind the counter, I noticed several bottles of champagne and wine. There was an ashtray full of cigarette butts on the countertop near the stove. I did not recognize my house, which had always been clean and fragrant before. Now it was as if I were in some vile place where the dregs of society dwelt. I heard some rustling upstairs. Putting the cake on an uncluttered section of the table, I went to check. As I stepped quietly up the stairs, I tried to still hear what was going on up there. Here at last was the door to the bedroom. I opened it and was horrified. There on our bed was a young man sleeping. The room was just as messy as the one downstairs. All his stuff was strewn across the floor, and the smell of cigarettes permeated the room. "Who are you?" I yelled, slamming the door loudly. The youngster jumped up on the bed, wiping his sleepy eyes. Sounded like he'd been drinking himself to sleep. "Who the hell are you?" I kept yelling. "Get up, you bastard! What are you doing in my house?" I jumped over to the bed and pulled him off. I looked back and forth between him and the bed. "Hey there, dude. Who are you?" He mumbled in a sleepy voice. "You arsehole. This is where I ask the questions. Answer me. What are you doing in my house?" I lifted the naked youngster by the neck with one hand and pressed him against the wall. What I saw made me so angry and filled me with adrenaline that I was ready for anything. At that moment, he started panting, and I loosened my grip a little so he could respond. Vince, who the hell are you? I'm here to see Abigail. I'm going out with her, he wheezed. It made sense to me now. All her tiredness and complaints about work were just excuses. I felt anger and darkness fill me. At that moment, everything human in me died. It was as if I had entered the Twilight Zone. With the strength I suddenly fell. I threw the boy against the cabinet, and he hit his whole body and slid to the floor. I walked over to him and started kneading his face like a punching bag. Let's get acquainted. I'm her husband. I was saying. When I saw the kid was no longer on his feet, I backed off a little. Was to Pamela easy whirl. I growled. I don't know. Maybe she went out for a beer. She didn't report in. Dude, I really didn't know she was married. Didn't you see the pictures on the shelves? The men's stuff in the house, the ring at the end of the day? I just wanted to keep pounding him again. I swear, man. She said it was her brother. I realized that a youngster in that position would hardly lie. Those words of his turned my senses upside down. For a moment I stepped back and crouched on the bed. I couldn't believe that Abigail had really done that. There was no way I could understand the reasons for this behavior. As I pondered this, I continued to stare at the terrified youngster curled up in a ball beside the closet, occasionally wiping the blood dripping from his nose and mouth with a shaking hand. Rational thought began to slip slowly into my mind, and I realized that the boy was only a used participant in my wife's delirium. Even though I wanted to finish him off, I let him go. He immediately grabbed some of his clothes and ran out of the house as he dressed. Finally, I shouted to him not to go to the police because I would make his life a complete nightmare. He only shook his head in a frightened way. I stayed in the house. I went downstairs and threw all the dishes off the kitchen table with a bang. The cake crumbled, leaving a creamy scone on the floor. I looked at it with indifference and sat down on a chair waiting for my wife to come. I didn't have to wait long. I heard the front door slam, and I could hear Abigail's cheerful mood. She took her time making her way down the hall with a bag in her hands and headed upstairs without noticing me. I continued to sit silently, waiting for her next move. I could hear her calling for the boy, then her exclamation at the bloodstains she saw, and soon I heard her stomping on the steps. A second later, she appeared in the doorway. Hello, Abigail, I said in an indifferent voice. Helped you. What are you doing here? The excitement in her voice increased with each word. Here it is. I came to see your lover. I answered in the same calm voice. I wanted to know how my beloved wife was doing. If she was not tired, I see she wasn't. Mick, you got it all wrong. Oh dear, it's a standard phrase. You could have come up with something more clever. I got up and walked over to her, took her hand, and pushed her into the kitchen. What had he turned our house into? I'm really tired. Tired of all the cleaning and the cooking. I'm tired of everything. You know what I mean? I decided to yell back at her. I looked at her like the fallen man I had once loved. Now she had turned into nothing. How long you been with that boy? Aren't you ashamed of yourself? You should have found a man by now, but he's just a kid. Are you crazy? Mick, it just happened. What do you want? I'm like a zombie work home, every day the same thing. And I'm sick of you. You got the same habits. I'm sick of everything. She wanted to attack me with her little fists, but the darkness inside me filled me again abruptly, and I just hit her back. I was too angry for my strength, and when I hit her, Abigail just fell to the floor without feeling. I was so disgusted with the house and Abigail that a voice in my head started whispering to me to just get rid of it all. Without thinking, I went to the stove, unscrewed all the burners, and immediately heard the quiet hiss of gas. Chin on the floor, I noticed an open pack of cigarettes. I took one out and lit it. I picked up a plate from the floor that had miraculously not broken, put the lit cigarette on it, and left the house. I'd already gone a block and a half from the house when there was an explosion somewhere behind me. Dear listeners, your support is very important to us. If you like our story, please like, comment, and subscribe. It's very motivating for us. We need your feedback to improve our content.